Prosecutors and the NYPD are investigating a report that some of these men are now on the run.
Dozens of people filing off 3 buses in San Diego, the majority adult men, carrying a backpack of belongings.
Our criminal justice system is upside down. It fails every day.
Governor DeSantis said today that he's deploying members of the Florida State Guard and the Florida National Guard.
This Saturday, Chicago is set to start evicting migrants from facilities.
Dozens of people rallied in Chicago today for a solution to the city's migrant crisis.
There are people on the terrorist watch list that are apprehended all the time coming across the border.
Migrants fled to California. According to a senior law enforcement official who spoke with CNN on Wednesday, the New York City Police Department no longer believes that 4 of the suspects who were arrested and later freed after an attack on NYPD officers in Times Square departed the city on a bus to California. During an interview with CNN on February 1, the same senior law enforcement official stated that 4 of the suspects who had been detained in the attack that occurred in January against 2 New York Police Department officers had been given bus tickets by a faith-based charity and were currently on their way to Calexico, California. The day after the release of 4 men who had been arrested in connection with the attack that occurred in January, city officials received a tip from an individual who claimed that they had recognized the 4 men from television and that the men had been given bus tickets by a faith-based charity that the individual worked with, according to multiple law enforcement officials. Following that, the individual was questioned, and the senior law enforcement official stated that the subject was able to identify the men based on photographs. As a result of the New York Police Department's request that Calexico police investigate an address that was provided by the charity, the Calexico police did not find anyone who recognized the suspects. It was later discovered that one of the individuals who had been thought to have escaped was caught in New York City on accusations of robbery. After that arrest and the investigation that took place in Calexico, the police came to the conclusion that the tip came from an incorrect identification.
Why aren't they in jail right now? They brutally attacked a New York City police officer.
Help us decompress people at the border so that we're not getting 3,200 people through our front door.
Our criminal justice system is upside down. It fails every day.
Department of Homeland Security losing track of asylum seekers as they wait for immigration hearings.
A fight occurred in January when authorities attempted to disperse a disorderly group that was gathered outside of a shelter for migrants located close to Times Square, according to the police. The officers attempted to take a person into custody, but multiple unidentified individuals repeatedly kicked and punched the officers in the head and body, according to the police. After that, the suspects escaped on foot. It was reported by the police that the officers sustained minor injuries and were treated at the site. As a result of the incident, there has been an upsurge in the number of migrants and asylum seekers arriving at the border between the U.S. and Mexico. Many of these individuals have traveled to large cities either on their own or aboard buses chartered by the state of Texas. An official from the New York City Department of Human Services told CNN earlier this month that the city is currently caring for approximately 67,000 migrants out of the more than 173,900 migrants who have landed in the city since spring 2022.
Dozens of people filing off 3 buses in San Diego, the majority adult men, carrying a backpack of belongings.
Prosecutors and the NYPD are investigating a report that some of these men are now on the run.
Released by Customs and Border Patrol at a local transit center to figure out the next steps in their journey.
Dana, good morning. 5 of the migrant men who were charged with felony assault but still released without cash.
Seized Mexican borders. Eagle Pass, Texas is at the center of a growing feud between Texas and federal authorities over the migrant crisis and jurisdiction over the U.S.-Mexico border. The dispute intensified after Texas blocked U.S. Border Patrol agents from Shelby Park, a city park on the Rio Grande, which was seized and secured. The ongoing fracas at Eagle Pass, Texas, have been a source of tension between the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the Mexican government. On January 10, the Texas National Guard blocked the Border Patrol from placing mobile surveillance equipment inside Shelby Park, and Texas denied the Border Patrol access to several miles of the border. state authorities began erecting razor wire, fencing, and gates to shut off access to Shelby Park, an adjoining golf course, and an area under the port of entry bridge federal agents had been using as a waiting area for migrants. On January 12, Mexico's National Institute of Migration learned about the drowning incident of 2 children and a woman in the area of the Shelby Park boat ramp. A Border Patrol supervisor from the Eagle Pass station was informed of the 3 drownings, and 2 other migrants were in distress on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. The Guard staff sergeant allegedly said Border Patrol was not allowed in the area, even in emergency situations. Instead, the staff sergeant sent Texas Guardsmen to investigate. On January 13, Texas allowed Border Patrol access to the boat ramp in the Shelby Park area, but with restrictions, such as requiring information about each Border Patrol agent entering the area and offering limited access to the agency. On January 15, a Border Patrol agent drove through an access road within the roughly 2.5-mile area, but the agent was stopped and questioned by a Texas National Guard member. The Biden administration submitted a filing to the Supreme Court, including details of the migrant drownings on January 12, arguing that Texas is firm in its continued efforts to exercise complete control of the border and land in the area, and block Border Patrol's access to the border even in emergency circumstances. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has set a deadline for Texas authorities to end its blockade of Eagle Pass and allow federal agents to resume operations in the area. If Texas does not comply, the DHS will refer the matter to the Department of Justice for appropriate action. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has rebutted some of the federal government's claims as false, stating that Border Patrol agents do have access to Shelby Park to respond to medical emergencies. Paxton also rebutted the federal agents' claims that the Texas Military Department did not prevent U.S. Border Patrol from entering Shelby Park to attempt a water rescue of migrants in distress. On January 17, Texas authorities started arresting migrants at Shelby Park and charging them with criminal trespassing, marking the state's first arrests of migrants since Texas took control of the area 1 week earlier. The Supreme Court voted 5-4 to allow Border Patrol agents to remove razor wire set up by Texas governor, but Texas Governor Greg Abbott said he will continue to defend Texas's constitutional authority to secure the border and prevent the Biden administration from destroying their property. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has sent a letter to Greg Abbott, reiterating the federal government's demand for state authorities to fully reopen the Shelby Park area to Border Patrol agents.
On the border, then the borders are for the United States of America. It is an insult.
They had gathered for months in Tapachula, a city in Mexico's southeast state of Chiapas near the border.
Governor DeSantis said today that he's deploying members of the Florida State Guard and the Florida National Guard.
The DHS General Counsel cited the Supreme Court's ruling, allowing federal authorities to cut or remove razor wire, and argued it had the legal right to access disputed areas in Eagle Pass. The department acquired permanent real estate interests in and around Eagle Pass in 2008 to support the construction and maintenance of border barriers in and around the Shelby Park area. The federal government does not have immediate plans for a massive removal of the razor wire in the Eagle Pass area unless the situation changes drastically or there's an emergency. A law enforcement source told CNN that federal agents are standing ready to breach the fencing to render aid to any individual in distress or if otherwise deemed operationally necessary. Texas's governor accused President Joe Biden of failing to fulfill his constitutional duty to protect the nation's borders by wasting taxpayer dollars to tear open Texas's border security infrastructure.
Eagle Pass, Texas, and you've been talking to some migrants in the area as well this morning. What's been the reaction? What are you seeing right now, Jorge?
The decision will allow Border Patrol agents to cut razor wire along the southern border Governor Abbott had installed.
Ron DeSantis announcing today he is sending Florida troops to the country's southern border.
On January 26, the Department of Homeland Security set a second deadline for Texas to agree to fully reopen disputed parts of the Shelby Park area to federal Border Patrol agents. More than 24 attorney generals signed a letter of support for the state of Texas's fight to secure its border. addressed to Governor Abbott and DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Abbott announced plans to build an 80-acre base to house up to 1,800 Texas National Guard members near Eagle Pass. Former President Donald Trump is scheduled to visit Eagle Pass, while Biden is expected to meet with U.S. Border Patrol agents, law enforcement, and local leaders in Brownsville.
Thousands of migrants intent on reaching the United States spent Christmas walking toward the U.S.-Mexico border.
Than they do in Texas for the time being.
This is happening as a coalition of Republican governors prepares to head to the Texas border this weekend.
There are people on the terrorist watch list that are apprehended all the time coming across the border.
Migrant drop-offs. A charter bus company, Wind Transportation LLC, is suing Chicago for violating its ordinance banning unannounced migrant drop-offs. The city's ordinance, enacted on December 8, requires unscheduled one-way buses from outside the Chicago area to get advance approval from the city to drop people off. Violators can be fined $3,000 and have their vehicles impounded. The ordinance is in response to the influx of over 30,000 migrants arriving from Texas on government-contracted charter buses, often dropped off on street corners with little or no notice. The city has bused over 90,000 migrants to sanctuary cities run by Democratic elected officials since April 2022 under Republican Governor Greg Abbott.
This Saturday, Chicago is set to start evicting migrants from facilities.
Dozens of people rallied in Chicago today for a solution to the city's migrant crisis.
Most of the asylum seekers that we spoke to are from Venezuela and Colombia. They say they don't have jobs, no work papers.
Wind Transportation LLC is taking action against the city's ordinance because it unlawfully interferes with its business and violates Wind's constitutional rights and the rights of Wind's passengers. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.